Jennifer had always trusted Mark, until the day she uncovered the secret he'd been hiding right under her nose. As their family reunion unfolded, Jennifer unknowingly stepped into a web of lies that would shatter her world forever. What began as a day of laughter and celebration quickly turned into a terrifying realization. Her husband was having an affair with someone far too close to home. Jennifer and Mark Harris had built a life that many would describe as perfect. Married for 15 years, their love story had all the hallmarks of a fairy tale. They had met in college, where Mark was the charming, ambitious business major, and Jennifer was the quiet but bright communications student. It didn't take long before they were inseparable. Their chemistry was undeniable, and before they knew it, they were married and starting a family. They had 2 children, Emily and Jack, both of whom were bright, well-behaved, and healthy. They lived in a beautiful suburban home with a white picket fence, and every weekend seemed to bring a new family outing or gathering, reinforcing the idea that they had everything one could hope for. Jennifer was a stay-at-home mom, a role she had always dreamed of. She poured her energy into raising their children, keeping their home immaculate, and ensuring that everything Mark needed when he came home from work was ready. It was a life of routine, yes, but it was a life that worked for them. Mark, on the other hand, worked long hours as a marketing director at a well-established tech company. He was good at his job, really good, and had quickly moved up the ranks. His success at work allowed them to live comfortably, and they had a wide social circle that included friends, family, and some of his colleagues. Every year, the Harris family hosted a large family reunion. It had become a tradition, a way to keep the family close despite the busy schedules that everyone seemed to have. The reunion was always held at their house, with relatives flying in from different parts of the country. It was a grand affair, filled with laughter, games, and an overabundance of food. Jennifer took great pride in organizing the event. She planned every detail meticulously, from the decorations to the menu, to make sure everyone had a good time. Mark, though, was often the one behind the grill or in the kitchen, always offering help or trying to get out of the way when the women took charge. This year, Jennifer was especially excited for the reunion. It had been a difficult year for the family. Emily had been struggling with some school issues, and Jack had gone through a rough patch with his friends. It had taken a lot of emotional energy to get them back on track. Jennifer felt that this gathering would be the perfect way to reset and bring the family together again in a positive way. She had picked out new decorations for the backyard and even planned a few surprise activities for the kids. As always, she was focused on making everything perfect. But there was something that was starting to gnaw at Jennifer. It was subtle, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. For weeks leading up to the reunion, Mark had been acting strangely. He was more distant than usual, often distracted when they spoke or when they spent time together. He'd been coming home later from work, and even when he was there, he seemed preoccupied. Jennifer chalked it up to the pressure of his job. After all, he had recently been promoted, and with that came more responsibility, more late nights, and more travel. Still, a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She kept herself busy with the preparations for the reunion, but the nagging feeling in the back of her mind grew stronger with each passing day. She told herself it was just stress, but deep down she wasn't so sure. The morning of the reunion, Mark was up earlier than usual, rushing around with a sense of urgency. Jennifer noticed that he seemed more anxious than excited for the day ahead. When he left for the office to tie up a few last-minute things before the event, Jennifer couldn't help but watch him leave, wondering if things would go back to normal once the family was all together. She wanted to believe everything would be fine, that this year's reunion would be just like the others, another perfect day. But she couldn't shake the unease that lingered in her chest. Little did she know, the events that were about to unfold would change their family forever. The reunion began like any other. The house was filled with the sounds of laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the warmth of familiar faces catching up after a long time apart. Jennifer floated between rooms, making sure everything was in place and everyone had what they needed. It was a role she was used to, making people feel comfortable, ensuring the day ran smoothly. Her mind briefly strayed to Mark, who was in the backyard grilling with a few of the men. As always, he had a way of commanding attention, a natural leader among their friends and family. His laughter echoed across the yard, and Jennifer smiled, reassured that at least he appeared to be having a good time. But her gaze often drifted back to Rachel. Rachel had been invited by Mark, a colleague from his office, and though Jennifer had met her a few times at work-related events, she didn't know her well. Rachel was young, mid-20s, and a little too polished for Jennifer's taste. There was something about her presence that felt off. Rachel was the type of person who effortlessly drew attention without even trying, and today, she seemed to be doing just that. Jennifer noticed how often Rachel and Mark exchanged glances, laughing at jokes that only the two of them seemed to understand. The longer Jennifer watched, the more uncomfortable she felt. It wasn't just the casual closeness between them. It was the intensity in their interactions. They spoke quietly, stealing moments alone together. Whether it was when they stepped inside to grab a drink or when they stood by the grill, just the two of them, Jennifer couldn't help but notice that their proximity seemed intentional, a familiarity that went beyond the realm of mere co-workers. At one point, Jennifer excused herself to go inside and check on the kids, who were playing in the living room. When she returned, she found herself standing just inside the sliding door, watching Mark and Rachel laugh together near the corner of the yard. Their body language was unmistakable. Rachel's hand brushed against Mark's arm as she spoke, and he responded with a smile that lingered a bit too long. Jennifer's heart began to race, but she tried to push the feeling away, telling herself she was overreacting. After all, she had no reason to suspect anything untoward. The reunion continued in full swing, but Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Her earlier unease had blossomed into something more palpable, a knot of suspicion tightening in her stomach. Her mind began to replay the little things, Mark's distractedness in the weeks leading up to the reunion, his late nights at work, his distance at home. Perhaps she thought she was simply reading too much into things, but then there was the way Rachel kept finding reasons to stay close to Mark, the way she lingered near him, laughing too loudly at things that weren't particularly funny. Jennifer tried to focus on the conversation around her, but every time her eyes flicked toward the backyard, her stomach churned. She wanted to believe she was imagining things, that it was just a harmless workplace friendship. But deep down, she knew something wasn't right. After dinner, as the sun began to set and the lights of the backyard twinkled with the soft glow of lanterns, Jennifer retreated to the kitchen to take a breath. She busied herself washing dishes, trying to push away the growing feeling of dread. As she scrubbed a plate, she glanced out the window. There, standing at the far edge of the yard, were Mark and Rachel once again. Their heads were close together, their bodies angled toward one another as they spoke quietly. Jennifer's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a friendship. It was something more, something intimate. As the night wore on, Jennifer's mind raced with possibilities. What if her suspicions were true? What if Mark had been hiding something from her for months? The thought was unbearable, but as much as she tried to push it away, it lingered, gnawing at her. When the last of the guests finally left and the house quieted down, Jennifer sat alone for a long time, staring at her phone. She couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen, about the moments she had witnessed throughout the day. She didn't have concrete proof, but something told her she needed to know more. There was a pit in her stomach that wouldn't go away. A gut feeling that told her everything was about to change. Later that night, as Mark came to bed, Jennifer lay awake in the dark, listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing. Her mind raced with questions, and she felt a sense of foreboding settle in her chest. This wasn't just about a reunion. This was about something far deeper, a secret she was only beginning to uncover. The days following the reunion were filled with a tense quietness that Jennifer couldn't shake. Mark seemed distant, more absorbed in his work than ever before, while Jennifer found herself replaying the events of the reunion over and over in her mind. The way Mark had interacted with Rachel, the easy familiarity, the private moments, they all pointed to something Jennifer couldn't ignore any longer. She knew deep down that something was wrong, but she couldn't bring herself to confront Mark just yet. Instead, she chose to observe, to wait for a sign that would confirm her growing suspicions. At first, she tried to distract herself with the usual routine, taking care of the kids, keeping the house in order. But her mind always circled back to that nagging feeling in her gut. Every time Mark stepped out of the room to take a call or disappeared into the office late at night, her stomach would tighten. There was a growing distance between them that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with something unspoken. Jennifer had always trusted Mark implicitly, and the idea that he could betray her in such a fundamental way seemed unimaginable. But the signs were mounting, and she couldn't pretend anymore. It wasn't until the following weekend that Jennifer decided she couldn't wait any longer. The moment came on a Saturday afternoon while Mark was out for a quick errand, and she was home alone. Her hands trembled as she stood in front of their shared bedroom, staring at the drawer where Mark kept his phone. She had never felt the need to look through his personal things before, but this was different. This was about understanding what was happening behind the walls of their marriage. With a steadying breath, Jennifer opened the drawer and pulled out Mark's phone. It was the first time she'd touched it in months, and her heart pounded as her fingers hovered over the screen. Unlocking it felt like a betrayal in itself, but Jennifer couldn't stop herself. She told herself she wasn't doing anything wrong. She was simply searching for answers. As the phone opened, Jennifer scrolled through his messages and calls, her heart sinking as she read each one. At first it was normal enough. Messages about work, family updates, casual check-ins. But then she saw it. The thread of texts between Mark and Rachel. They were recent, just a few days after the reunion, and the tone was unmistakable. It wasn't the kind of text conversation one would expect between colleagues. It was flirtatious, intimate even, filled with inside jokes and laughter. One message stood out above all others. "I can't wait to see you again soon. We've got to finish what we started." Jennifer's breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was reading. The words seemed to confirm everything she had feared. There was no denying it now. Mark was having an affair with Rachel. The realization hit her like a cold wave, and she felt the floor beneath her suddenly shift. For a long moment, she stood there frozen, staring at the screen, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what she had just uncovered. The sadness hit her next. How could he do this to her, to their family? They had built a life together, and it all felt like it was crumbling in an instant. She thought back to the little signs, the late nights, the distracted conversations, the way he had avoided her lately. They were all pieces of a puzzle she hadn't wanted to solve. Now it was staring her in the face. Jennifer didn't know what to do next. Her hands shook as she put the phone back in the drawer, but she didn't feel any relief. The truth was out, and she was left with the crushing weight of it all. She couldn't face Mark yet, didn't know if she was ready to confront him, to hear the excuses, the lies, the inevitable attempt to explain it all away. She couldn't process it all in that moment, but she knew one thing for certain. things would never be the same. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Jennifer moved through the motions, making dinner for the kids, tidying up the house, but her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't focus on anything except the betrayal she had uncovered. Mark returned later that evening, his usual charm and smile fading when he saw the look on Jennifer's face. He knew something was wrong, but he had no idea how much Jennifer had discovered. Jennifer avoided his eyes, her heart racing in her chest. She wasn't ready for the confrontation, not yet. But as Mark made himself comfortable on the couch, she knew it was only a matter of time before she would have to face him. She would have to confront the man she had loved for so long, and ask the questions that would shatter everything she thought she knew about their marriage. That night, as Mark sat next to her on the couch, Jennifer stared ahead, her thoughts swirling with a mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief. She was holding herself together by a thread, but inside, everything was breaking. The evening stretched on, a heavy silence hanging between them. Mark, seemingly unaware of the storm brewing inside Jennifer, made small talk about his day, asking how the kids were, and if anything exciting had happened at the store. Jennifer answered mechanically, her voice tight, her heart pounding. She couldn't look at him, couldn't bring herself to meet his eyes. It felt like they were strangers, not the couple who had shared so much of their lives together. She could feel the weight of what she knew pressing against her chest, suffocating her. The truth was out, but she hadn't yet confronted him. She wasn't ready to ask the questions that would break everything apart. Mark, sensing the tension in the air, finally paused and glanced at Jennifer. His smile faded slightly as he studied her, trying to read her mood. "What's wrong?" he asked, his tone casual but edged with concern. He didn't know it yet, but those words would set the stage for the confrontation that was inevitable. Jennifer didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared at her hands, twisting the edge of her shirt nervously. She wanted to be calm, collected, to gather her thoughts and approach this with the clarity it deserved. But there was no clarity. There was only rage, heartbreak, and betrayal. She had always trusted him, always believed in their bond, and now that trust felt shattered like glass underfoot. Finally she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "I know about you and Rachel." Mark froze, his eyes wide with surprise, and for a brief moment, he looked like a deer caught in headlights. Jennifer's words hung in the air between them, and she could feel the tension shift, the atmosphere becoming thick with impending conflict. Mark's face paled slightly, his lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. He was caught off guard, but Jennifer could see the faint flicker of guilt in his eyes. It was a brief moment, quickly masked by a defensive stance, but it was there. "What are you talking about?" Mark finally asked, his voice rising a little, a touch of panic creeping in. Jennifer didn't need him to explain himself. She knew the truth now. "I found the messages on your phone, the texts. The ones you sent to Rachel. Don't deny it, Mark, I know everything." Mark's expression shifted from confusion to something else, something darker. He sighed heavily and ran a hand through his hair, clearly stalling for time. "Jennifer, I don't know what you think you saw, but it's not what it looks like." Jennifer's pulse quickened as she stood up from the couch, the anger bubbling to the surface. "What it looks like, Mark? You've been lying to me for months. You've been sneaking around behind my back, and now you're going to tell me it's not what it looks like? Do you think I'm stupid?" Mark stood up too, taking a step toward her, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "I didn't mean for this to happen, things got complicated, Jennifer. Work got complicated, and Rachel, she's just someone I've been talking to a lot. I never meant for it to go this far." Jennifer's eyes burned with unshed tears, but she refused to let them fall. She wasn't going to cry in front of him. Not now. Not after everything he had done. "You're telling me it just happened? You've been lying to me and you think I'm going to buy that excuse? What about everything we've built, Mark? What about our family? What about Emily and Jack? Did you think about them when you were with her? Mark opened his mouth to speak, but Jennifer cut him off, her voice rising with the emotion that had been building inside her for weeks. Don't you dare try to explain this away. You've betrayed me in the worst way possible. You've broken my trust and now I don't know who you are anymore. Mark's face tightened, and he looked down, unable to meet her gaze. I'm sorry, Jen. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt our family. It was a mistake, a huge mistake. A mistake, those two words, so simple, so dismissive, cut through her like a knife. Jennifer shook her head, her voice low and filled with disbelief. A mistake? You don't get to call it that. A mistake is spilling coffee on your shirt or forgetting to pick up groceries. This, what you did, wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. A conscious decision to hurt me. To hurt us. Mark stepped back, his face flushed with guilt. I didn't know how to stop it, he said, almost pleading. It just happened and I got in too deep. Jennifer took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had been preparing for this moment, but hearing him try to justify what he had done only made the pain worse. She had trusted him. And now, in front of her, was a man who had betrayed everything they had built. I can't do this anymore, Mark, Jennifer whispered, the words like a final verdict. She felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her, but she knew it was the right one. I need space. I need time to think about what I want. But right now, I can't look at you. I can't be with you. Mark's face crumpled as the reality of the situation hit him. But Jennifer wasn't sure if he was crying for her or for himself. It didn't matter. She had made her decision. The next few moments were filled with a kind of hollow silence as Mark turned and walked out of the room, leaving Jennifer standing alone in the dimly lit living room. The house, which had once been full of love and laughter, felt cold now. The life she had known seemed to be slipping away, and Jennifer knew that whatever came next, it wouldn't be the same. The days following the confrontation felt like a blur for Jennifer. She moved through her routine in a haze, her mind too consumed with the betrayal and the uncertainty of what came next. Mark had left the house the night of their argument, and he didn't return for several days. During that time, Jennifer spent most of her time alone with the kids. She tried to maintain normalcy for them, taking Emily to school and helping Jack with his homework, but it was hard to focus. The weight of her discovery, the crushing reality of her husband's affair, hung over her like a dark cloud. She had told herself she needed time to think, but every minute of every day felt like an eternity. She wasn't sure what she was supposed to do next. Divorce? Could she really walk away from the life they had built together? The thought was terrifying, but the more she reflected on what had happened, the more she realized she couldn't pretend things were okay. Her trust in Mark had been shattered, and the idea of going back to the way things were seemed impossible. Mark called her several times in those first few days, but she avoided his calls. She wasn't ready to hear his apologies or his explanations, not yet. She needed space to process everything, to understand her own feelings before deciding how to move forward. What hurt the most was the realization that she had been blind to the signs for so long. Had she been so wrapped up in their routine and keeping the family together that she had missed the cracks in their marriage? How could she have not seen the distance growing between them? The house felt empty without Mark, even though the kids were there with her. Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling of loneliness that had crept in. She missed the man she thought she knew, the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago, but the person who had returned after all these years, the man who had betrayed her, was someone she couldn't recognize. And that was perhaps the hardest part of all. Not just the affair, but the erosion of the connection they once had. The intimacy, the trust, it was all gone. Could it be rebuilt? Was it even worth trying? On the 5th day after the argument, Mark returned. He walked in quietly, looking more subdued than Jennifer had ever seen him. He didn't say anything at first. He simply stood there in the doorway, waiting for her to acknowledge him. Jennifer felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, disappointment. But above all, she felt exhausted. She wasn't sure what she expected from him, but she knew that whatever it was, it wouldn't undo what had already been done. Finally, Mark spoke. "I'm so sorry, Jen. I know I've hurt you in a way that can't be fixed easily, but I want to try. I love you. I love our family. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right if you'll give me the chance." Jennifer met his gaze, but she didn't speak right away. She wasn't ready to forgive him. She wasn't sure she ever could. But what she knew deep down was that she couldn't continue on in a marriage that felt so broken. The words she had been avoiding finally came to her, and she said them with a calm she didn't feel. "I need time, Mark," she said softly. "Time to think, to figure out what I want. But I can't promise you anything right now. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I don't even know what I want anymore." Mark nodded, his face lined with regret. "I understand. And I'll give you that space. I just want you to know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I don't want to lose you." Jennifer nodded but didn't respond. She couldn't promise him anything, not when everything felt so uncertain. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in days, she felt a small sense of clarity. She wasn't ready to make a decision. She needed to take control of her life again, to figure out who she was without Mark in it. The pain was still raw, but it was beginning to dull, and she realized that no matter what happened, she would be okay. In the weeks that followed, Jennifer sought counseling, both on her own and eventually with Mark. It wasn't easy. There were moments when she felt like giving up, when the anger and betrayal overwhelmed her, but slowly, she began to regain a sense of herself. The process was slow, and the path ahead was uncertain. But Jennifer knew she couldn't stay stuck in the past. She couldn't stay in a relationship built on lies. By the time Mark was ready to talk about rebuilding their marriage, Jennifer had already begun to understand something important. No matter what happened with them, she had to rebuild her own sense of self first. She had to find out who she was outside of the role of wife and mother, to reconnect with her own dreams and aspirations. In the end, the healing wouldn't come from Mark's apologies or promises. It would come from within her. Only then could she begin to decide what was best for her and her family. The story of their marriage wasn't over. Not yet. But Jennifer was no longer the woman who would accept betrayal and silence. She had taken the first step toward finding her voice again. And that was the only certainty she could hold on to as she moved forward.